Good morning, it's Saturday from lovely St. Augustine, Florida. It's about 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm slurping my coffee. It rained last night. I've got the front door wide open and the train's going by across the street, so you might be hearing that. Good morning, good morning. Today I want to share with you my findings from the first place where I lived when I moved from DC to Florida. And that was strange Daytona Beach, the world's most famous beach, the land of NASCAR and surf competitions and bike week. But it isn't just Daytona, it's the region. There's a good bit of Flagler barf history in the community just north of there, known as Ormond Beach, and a wonderful little pocket between Daytona and Ormond, known as Holly Hill. So you're going to share my morning coffee with me this morning as I talk about that with you. Before we continue, just want to shout out to Melanie, Michelle, and Buffy at Unguru. You can find an ensemble of independent researchers, educators, and entrepreneurs at ungurulife.com. Folks joining together to facilitate this upcoming sovereignty. Oh, in a good way. You'll be finding more of me over there soon. But let's start now. Let's start. Let me get a slurp of coffee here. So we're going to start in the area known now as Ormond Beach, which is the next city north on the coast from Daytona Beach. And again, I want to acknowledge my front door is wide open. I'm about 8 feet away from it, and there's a lot of noise out there. So I hope that's not a problem for you. There's a hotel, was a hotel in Ormond Beach, known as the Hotel Ormond. That was my Flagler connection. It opened in 1887 at the hands of two gentlemen by the name of John Anderson and Joseph Price. You'll hear those names again. It started in 1887, and as we hear these ridiculous things that's supposed to have opened a year later, wait till you see pictures. And then it was sold. That process, which we will talk about more, created a lot of changes in the region. We'll return to that. That's the precursor. Let's start with what was there before. The plantations of British-owned Florida. So Florida was a Spanish territory, and then there were some wars, and it became a British territory for 20 years. From 1763 to 1783, it was a British territory. The first Treaty of Paris. Britain got Florida in exchange for Cuba and the Philippines and the French Indian Wars. So the British Crown was offering land grants to wealthy British investors, entrepreneurs, those deciding to be plantation owners and growers and yada, yada. This gentleman here, considered one of the founders of what we now call Ormond Beach, was a fantastic humanitarian slave trader by the name of Richard Oswald. I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. This hee-haw ceded 20,000 acres along what we call the Tomoka and Halifax rivers, two main rivers in Ormond Beach today. At the confluence of the Tomoka and Halifax rivers, an incredibly beautiful area, lush, 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 is now known as Tomoka State Park. That was his plantation, some of it. It was known as the Mount Oswald Plantation. He was a grower of indigo, rice, timber, molasses, rum, sugar, and oranges. Made his money as a slave trader back in Scotland. Wonderful. Just a wonderful humanitarian fellow. This is a shot, I didn't take it, but this is from Tomoka State Park, which was part of his plantation. It is a marvelous, beautiful park. You will go through every what do you call it, biosphere in terms of water and canopy. And you know, of course, something that I've learned is that wherever you see extensive state or national park, you've probably got indigenous lands and antiquitech that the state or the federal government don't want you to have access to. So think about that. Tomoka State Park is acres and acres and acres of land and water and marsh. This is a marker denoting it being Mount Oswald Plantation back in the day. Oh, I didn't mean to go that far quite yet. But of course, when Oswald got here, it was indigenous land. It would have been the people that ultimately the Spanish are responsible for completely genociding, the Timucua, who were giants, minimum of 6 and 7 feet tall, but that's quite hidden. But if you dig, you'll find it. They or their ancestors would have been on the land. Their ancestors, of course, being the mound builders of Florida, the famous mound builders who were even taller than the Timucua. All of those mound builders all over the indigenous held lands of the US were giants. We had them here too. Now, when Florida was still Spanish territory, there was a diplomat apparently that was riding his schooner through the rivers, and he stumbled upon this area in 1605. This gentleman's name is listed as Merico. And he notes in his journals that the Timucua, or as we call them, that being the name of their language, not them, referred to this area as Nokoroko. So we know that they were here in 1605. Of course, they were there tens of thousands of years longer than that. Anyway, so in 1605, this wonderful humanitarian, Oswald, the slave trader, chartered 2 ships from Scotland or from England, I'm not sure which, loaded up with over 100 slaves, provisions, British staff, that would be his employees on the plantation, and various British people, or such, at least white-skinned people, shall we say, Caucasian people, who were interested in getting to the new land in service of indenture and make his way across the pond. Back in those days, you would come in through various places. It was very common to stop, say, for instance, in Savannah first, then to Jacksonville, perhaps then St. Augustine, all these provisioning stops. Of course, in Jacksonville or St. Augustine, they could get then to the St. Johns River, which took them inland into the middle of the state, and they can come down through the river systems. But in any way, he eventually got to the confluence of the Tomoka and the Halifax rivers. It was called Mosquito River then, the Halifax River, and started to set up shop. So he had a good run for about 20 years. After 20 years, the Second Treaty of Paris and the Seminole Wars created changes in politics in Florida, and this lovely land went back to the Spanish, and all of the British colonists just scooted out. Now, when Oswald had the land, he had what was known as the greatest sugar plantation in Florida and a massive distillery for rum. This marker stands today on the place where the ruins of one of the sugar processing areas is in Ormond Beach. This is a drawing supposedly of the plantation, its height. All that sugar cane, burn and burn and burn to make rum. So, after the British period, after the Second Treaty of Paris and the Second Seminole Wars, there was a lot of turmoil and unhappiness, shall we say, in this region of Florida. Remembering at the time that most of Florida was basically unclaimed swampland or sandy, tracts of pine. Second Seminole Wars resulted in all the plantations in the area being burned from Volusia County, as we call it now, which is where Daytona Beach and Ormond Beach are, all the way up into the Georgia border. That was all burned. This is an amazing, amazing, amazing place if you like ruins and that type of thing, as I do. Old archaeologists never get sick of ruins. This is an old plantation in what is now known as the Port Orange, New Smyrna Beach area, which is south of Daytona. This was Bulow. It was considered the finest plantation in the region at the time. Sugar and indigo. It was burned like everything else. You can see the burn char. The people we call the Seminole, that's not what they call themselves. It's actually an insulting name. Burned all the plantations after the Treaty of Moultrie Creek tried to relocate them to the beginning of the reservation system. This is all part of Bulow. You know, I'm sorry. This is not New Smyrna Beach. Beautiful place. Beautiful. Bulow is in Flagler Beach. It's north, not south. I apologize for that. I lost my mind. So anyway, so we had Spain, we had Britain, we had Spain again. Well, when Spain took over, they were very interested to get the plantations back up and running, if possible, even though they had all been burned. They were handing out land grants to any of the British who wanted to come back and try again to take the properties back over, try to get settlement and commerce restored. So a gentleman by the name of Henry Young was one of those. In 1803, he was deeded 850 acres. That included the old Three Chimneys region of the Oswald Plantation on what was still at the time called the Mosquito River. We now call it the Halifax River. He worked it for 6 years, but abandoned it in 1809. And if you know Ormond Beach, you know of Young Boulevard or Young Drive. Ridgewood is US 1, the main thoroughfare from Ponce Inlet all the way up to, well, US 1 goes all the way up to Maine. But it's run through South Daytona, Daytona, Holly Hill, and Ormond Beach. It's referred to as Ridgewood. But there's a stretch in there where it kind of, you go through a kind of little to the left, a little to the right kind of thing. And there's a stretch of it that's referred to as Young Drive. Well, that's named after Henry Young, the fellow who came back and tried to reestablish the old plantation land. So in 1822, we got Florida. We got the state of Florida. So again, things changed. A lot of the Spanish left, went to Cuba, went to the Bahamas. Things changed, politics changed. Now, in the 1870s, there was a company in New Britain, Connecticut, called the Corbin Block Company. And they were seeking to settle some of this land in this crazy new barbaric Florida. They were looking for a place where they could build a winter holiday community for their employees, as well as build a retirement community for their retirees. And here we were in this Florida land boom, as it was known. Land was incredibly cheap. Some of it was land, obviously, that had been worked and worked and worked for a good long time. Clearly supple and lush and producing at high yields. But so these folks from the Corbin Lot Company came down, purchased land that was selling at $2 an acre on the west side of the Mosquito River, AKA Halifax River, and started their community. And they named it New Britain. Now, again, if you're familiar with Ormond Beach, you know when you are right at the foot of the Granada Bridge, you've either come over the river from the beach side or you're about to go over. If you turn north onto Beach Street, the first block north of Granada is New Britain. So back in there, that was all this initial community. Now, there were other communities that were back there. There were homesteaders that had set up things. In fact, on the beach side, the beach peninsula, the peninsula of land between the Halifax River and the Atlantic Ocean of Ormond Beach, south, just immediately south of Granada, where the Stonewood Grill sits now. You may know that there's a street called Bosarvi. Well, back in this homesteading time, that actually started as a homestead for a couple of brothers, Bosarth. They had a home on the river. But this area was becoming so crazily popular that they started expanding their home. And it became a boarding house, like a youth hostel kind of boarding house. And it became known as Bosarv. So the street's named after them and that early boarding house. Anyway, we had a lot of people coming to what we now call Ormond Beach. The town apparently was completely incorporated in 1888, and it became in time named Ormond in honor of James Ormond Sr., a plantation owner who had been killed by a runaway slave in the 1700s. The Ormond plantation was on the beach side. So that means between the Halifax River and the Atlantic Ocean, and running north into what now would be considered Ormond Beach shores, heading north toward Flagler County. Beach was added to the name in 1950. Now, back to these Ormond people. Their plantation, they named Dameta. So the lands north of present Ormond Beach on the beach side. After Mr. Ormond was murdered, the family returned to Scotland and let overseers run the land. James Ormond II, his son, returned with their family in the 1820s. He eventually died in 1829, and he's buried near the current day Tomoka State Park. So after all these plantations were destroyed, as I said, the Spanish were trying to get people back on the land, even offering second chances to the British. There was some growing, but that wasn't the key thing. What seemed to be the key thing was using the trees, either the tapping of the trees for turpentine or just for lumber. And so what happened was people were coming in, either they knew how to be lumber husbands or they learned, and the landowners were able to hold on to their timber rights. So again, you've essentially got indentured working of land, but nonetheless, that's how things progressed after all the plantations were burned. Now we come to a couple of guys who were in this second flow of the Brits into what is now Ormond Beach. John Anderson and Joseph Price. If you know Ormond Beach, you know John Anderson Drive. The most beautiful houses in Ormond Beach today are on John Anderson Drive. And that's no coincidence. John Anderson was born in Portland, Maine, 1853. He, we are told, took courses in commercial exchange in college, and then took, now this is strange, 3 jobs in a year in foreign exchange at the J. Cook and Company in Maine, at the Agency of London, and the First National Bank of New York. Well, I don't know how in the 1850s you can be working in Maine, London, and New York. I don't know how that would be, but you know how inheritor stories are. Anyway, he had a cousin by the name of Samuel Dow. All these first, second generation American people coming from Britain. He was already living in Florida. He was living in New Britain, Florida, what we now call Ormond Beach, on the land side of Ormond Beach. And he wrote to cousin Johnny and said, hey, dude, you should come down here. There's so much opportunity down here. So John found a business partner, and together they left, hit land here in February of 1876. His partner and friend in endeavors to follow was a gentleman named Charles Fox. And while he was looking for land to build and develop, he met this guy, Joseph Downing Price. So Anderson and his cousin Dow, the guy who told him to come on down, purchased 80 acres in what became the Santa Lucia Plantation, which was part of the old Damietta Plantation, the old plantation of the Ormond family. And they grew oranges, lemons, and grapefruit. So things were really booming down here for a lot of reasons. The railroad coming in was one of them. The railroad before Flagler got his grubby hands on it. Since we know there were railroads everywhere before the inheritors put their names on it. In 1886, the St. John's and Halifax Railroad came through the region. And apparently Anderson and his partner here, Price, decided that they could really take advantage of the land, not only the land boom that was happening, but the let's winter in Florida boom that was happening. Start the result center here in Ormond Beach. It was already happening in St. Augustine. Here, before Flagler got here, we had big, beautiful hotels. One in particular, the Hotel San Marco, which everyone believes Flagler had burned down, but well, I didn't say that. Stands to reason. That hotel was the only real competition he had. There were other hotels, but nothing as big and nothing as expansive as the Hotel San Marco. But anyway, I regress. So in 1886, the railroad, the St. John's and Halifax lines, came through Daytona and Ormond Beach. In 1886, Flagler was here in St. Augustine, getting ready to start his first hotel, the Ponce de Leon, that he found. He found it. He found it. We are told that in 1887, the partners, Price and Anderson, built a bridge across the Halifax River. Realize at the time, people had to take ferries or sailboats to move across the river. In 1888, on January 1st, the new Ormond Hotel opened on their land, the Santa Lucia Plantation, which again had been a part of the Ormond Plantation. You're supposed to believe that that was built in 1 year. 1 year. One year. That is the Halifax River, called still Mosquito River back in the day. 1 year. All that coquina and red brick. You think they built that in 1 year? The Ormond Hotel began the legacy of Ormond Beach being a new vacation spot. So they had their hotel open for 2 years, not quite 2 years. But then Flagler got involved. dear Henry Flagler got involved and offered to buy it because he saw the potential, allowing them to be operating managers, but he being the owner, so he could expand it. Now, when he came here to St. Augustine, what he wanted to do is he wanted to build grand hotels that would attract the Vanderbilts, the Astors, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, all the movers and shakers, the landed industrial pigs that they were. And that's what he did. The San Marco Hotel, which I hold that he burned down, was just as big room and square foot wise as his Ponce de Leon Hotel, but it wasn't as opulent. He went for opulence. And if you look at any of a million photos that you can look up online, the Ponce de Leon Hotel, it's ridiculously opulent. So he saw potential here. Apparently, they built this hotel and things were cooking. They were doing really, really well. So he said, hey, right? Let me buy it. Let me expand it. Let's get Rockefeller, Vanderbilt, Astor, all those dudes. Let's get them here. I've already got them coming to St. Augustine. Let's get them in Ormond. So that's what he did. So 1890, he picked it up. 2 years later, he installed elevators. He built 3 new wings. He expanded the rooms from 75 to 400. Started tours of the area. There were 11 miles of breezeways and corridors, and it was the largest wooden structure in Florida at the time. In 1904, he ran an extension for the St. John's and Halifax Railway to literally come across the river directly to the front door of his hotel. He expanded into a saltwater pool as well. Dear Henry Flagler. Now, I just want to say, this hotel is gone now, but this right here, this cupola, this is all that is left of the original thing. And it's at, I'll show you, there is a park, there's a park now, and that cupola sits on that park. Some of this original hotel still stands. It's condos. But most of it was torn down in the 80s. Look at that antiquitech right there. Okay, so Flagler got his mitts on it, started making it snazzy. At some point, a couple years down the line, the boys, Anderson and Price, decided to buy another hotel. It was called the Coquina Hotel. You'll see pictures of that to come. So they had the 2 biggest hotels on the beach. When you see pictures of the hotel, you'll laugh. And realize they were in walking distance of one another. I always wonder where all these people came from to stay in these hotels. Oh my goodness. But this is the Ormond Hotel. Back in the day. Lovely. Lovely. There you go. There's the Coquina Hotel. That's the second hotel they bought. So Flagler owned the Ormond Hotel. They were operating managers, but they went ahead and they bought, doesn't say they built, this one, the Coquina. And that, of course, is the Atlantic Ocean. So between the two, that's a lot of rooms, right? Interesting. Walking distance. This being old A1A here, the Coast Road. My. Of course this is gone. Of course it is. Another interesting thing is both Price and Anderson died in 1911. They both died in 1911. What's up with that? I have no idea. Now, John Anderson is a name well known to Ormond Beach. Not only are the most expensive, luxurious, magnificent homes in Ormond Beach on John Anderson Drive, he was also the Volusia County tax assessor from 1876 to 78. And he was involved in the creation of the first golf course in Florida. Golf courses. Michelle Gibson, golf courses. Here we go, down another whole rabbit hole. We're not going down it today, but golf courses. Do you know that there's an American Society of Golf Course Architects? Yeah. There is. Lloyd Clifton is the golf course architect who was a member of the American Society of Golf Course Architects, who is supposed to have built the first golf course in Florida. And that was in Ocala in 1912, which is the Tennessee Derby area of Florida, where there are old plantations, but there are also thoroughbred breeders. He's also noted as designing two golf course communities that are open and very popular in northern central Florida today: Plantation Bay in Flagler County, and The Villages, which is a huge, ridiculous golf course community. Anyway, golf course architects. Indian burial grounds and golf course architects. I'll just leave that right there. Here's another view of the Hotel Coquina, which may well have been what is now the Royal Floridian. I'm not sure. If I'm correct in seeing this as Granada Boulevard and the Granada approach to Atlantic Beach, and this being the hotel that sits on that corner, the south corner of Granada at the Atlantic Ocean, what sits there now is the Royal Floridian. And so that would mean that the Kokina Hotel is the precursor to the Royal Floridian. But I'm not sure. There were other hotels here as well, in here, though not as grand. Where were all these people coming from? Where were all these people coming from? It just doesn't make any sense to me. Where were they all coming from? So, Ormond Beach was turning into a big resort, part of the Florida boom that Flagler is attributed to initiating through his railroad endeavors. So there were already railroads all over Florida. Flagler did not build the railroads. Read the history a little more carefully. People that don't know what they're talking about say he built the railroads. No, he didn't. The railroads were here. What he did, we can believe, I can believe this, is he figured out a way to unify the gauge of the track so that every train could travel on every foot of track instead of only this train can ride on this gauge track, right? But it can't go on that great track. I believe, as I read, that what he did is he unified the tracks so that every train that was already operating in the state of Florida could ride on every foot of track. Okay? So he essentially extended Florida and connected it all together through unified track from Key West all the way up to the Georgia border. So Flagler, a guy I just can't stand. But a man who is known for making things opulent and building hotels along his railroad lines. This is his first hotel. This is the Ponce de Leon. This is just down the street from where I live and I'm sitting right now. This is the hotel. Cough, cough. He's supposed to have built in 2 or 3 years. The hotel goes all the way back to here, by the way. It's now Flagler College. So he's supposed to have built that. Finished it in 87 or 88. Okay. Now, right across the street, right here, where this garden is the second hotel. The Alcazar. Right across the street. This is now the Lightner Museum. This one, he also is supposed to have built in 2 years. See, the railroad was here, and he was such a good shiller, attracting all his rich friends, because he made all his money with Rockefeller and Standard Oil, that all these people were coming down to winter from the cold Northeast in beautiful Florida. And you're supposed to believe that he built things like this in 2 years. Sure he did. He also is attributed with developing South Florida, essentially, through connecting it with the railroads. This is his other hotel he found, built, haha. This is the Breakers in West Palm Beach. I don't know a lot of the history of this because, of course, the history is all lies anyway, but this place is still there. Look at how they changed. There was something up there and they took it down. This is beautiful. It's right on the beach. Beautiful hotel. This is the Poinciana. Just gone. He's supposed to have built this too. Cough, cough. Look at all that. Royal Palm in Miami. Look, we're in France. We're Boston. Wherever his railroads went, his hotels got built. So we are to believe. Yeah, right. And of course, his home, Whitehall in West Palm. Flagler and Trump, neighbors. Now, just a little tidbit of interesting digging history. In that time between Britain and Spain, between Spain and America, when a lot of people, especially indigenous peoples of nations were moving around the globe. And the Civil War had ended the opportunity for people like Oswald to be slave traders. There was a movement opening up colonies in Africa to move freed slaves back. There was one in Sudan and one in Liberia. And you might remember the video that I made about the failed utopian colony in the Crescent City area of Florida, known as Rollstown. So the Rolls family were involved in that process. They tried to come here and start a what shall we call a utopian community is how it was billed. But the thing is that it was initially populated by ne'er-do-wells from the streets of Britain, from streetwalkers and pickpockets and orphans and criminals, essentially. Funny story. But when they realized that their utopia wasn't going to work, they weren't making any money, and that the crown of Britain, owning Florida at the time, was not going to give them any more money to waste on this failed endeavor, they reached out to buy land in Africa and get in on this scheme to indenture these newly freed slaves to Africa and set them up basically to indenture there. So while this was going on, there were at least two opportunities in the Volusia, now Volusia County area of Florida, where these newly freedmen could come back to America. One was in the area of New Smyrna Beach, which is the southern part of the Volusia County, so about an hour south of Daytona Beach, just on the other side of Ponce Inlet. There was a freedman colony there. And in a small area of the New Britain portion of what was not yet Ormond Beach, that was also known as Liberia. So if you look on a map, or if you know Ormond Beach, and this is fascinating because I think of driving through here, the region squared off between Dix Road on the north, Selden Road on the west, Lincoln Road on the east, and the Halifax Mosquito River and Riverside Drive on the south. That was Sudan, the colony of Sudan. So the newly freedmen who had left wherever they were on their plantations to the Sudan were able to come back and settle here. Across Grenada, which is the main drag, was Liberia, the same square of region, essentially. So where the Ormond Library is right now, that was Liberia for the freedmen returning to America from Liberia. And these two communities became known as Liberia. I didn't know that until I was reading. I find that fascinating. So, Mr. Flagler, what kind of people did he get to come to the Ormond Hotel when he did all these expansive changes? Well, the guest list included the Prince of Wales, Will Rogers, Henry Ford, Harvey Firestone, Thomas Edison, President Warren Harding, Harriet Beecher Stowe, the Aspers, the Vanderbilts, Al Capone and John D. Rockefeller, his partner at Standard Oil, actually rented a whole floor for 4 winter seasons. That's a funny story too, because Rockefeller, I guess, was ahead of his time, and he had been finding out about long life and the concept of unpolluted food and water and healthful ways of living, and being the megalomaniac that he was, he wanted to live to be 100. So he set a whole medical team on finding the place that was the purest, most unpolluted area where he could spend his senior days. So him coming to stay in Ormond was, well, partially, of course, because his business partner, Henry Flagler, had a hotel there, but also to see if this place that was full of potential for land ownership and whatnot would be ideal. Apparently he did. They made that decision because he bought the property across the street. The Ormond Hotel is gone, but the house he bought, he didn't build, it was already there. He did purchase that. He did decide to stay there and live to be 97, as we're told. That property, which you will see in a minute, is known as the Casements. That was his winter home. And it now belongs to the city of Ormond Beach. And it's a very lush couple blocks of homes, and it's a museum to this grandiose time. There was a golf course at the Flagler Hotel. And if I read this correctly, Ed Sullivan, like I'm old enough to remember Ed Sullivan on TV. If I read this correctly, unless there's another Ed Sullivan is supposed to have been the golf secretary in the mid-20s. Huh. I didn't look it up. I don't know if there's another Ed Sullivan. To me, there's only one Ed Sullivan. Also during this time, before Flagler unified all the railroads, to get around Florida, you did so on ferries, sailboats, and schooners. You could take railroads hither and yon, but they didn't connect. So it's kind of like transferring buses. You know, you have to get off one bus and onto another. You have to get off one train and get onto another. And sometimes you have to get off a bus and then walk a few blocks to catch your transfer. Well, that's how it was with trains. So during the British period, there was a unifying road that had been built, trying to unify as much of Florida as possible. It became known as the King's Road. It was a paved road, a bricked road. And interestingly enough, there are still parts of the paved brick road. It's not paved, it's brick. There's a portion in St. Augustine here where I live. It's just called Old Brick Road. And it's brick. It's red brick road out in the open woody area between St. Augustine and Flagler Beach. There's just homes on it. And also in Flagler Beach, there is a paved main road called Old King's Road. Well, that's part of what had been the Old King's Road. It's just been paved over. If we are to understand that correctly, they paved over the old bricks. But there is a section where you can still drive on the old brick road that was the King's Road. So whoever built the bridges made a great improvement. Who knows, right? Who knows what really built anything? But so when Flagler unified all the trains made things a lot easier. A lot easier indeed. Now, in 1914, there was an employee at the Hotel Ormond. His name was Billy Fagan. He had an opportunity to buy some of the old Young plantation. Remember, the Young plantation is where the Three Chimneys sugar mill ruin was after the burning. So he built his home, and Flagler was a schmoozer. Let's entertain these people. Let's have tours. Let's do slave trading reenactments, which apparently they did in the old slave market downtown St. Augustine. Anyway, so Billy Fagan built his home on the old Young plantation. And the old Three Chimneys were part of his home. So he turned it into an attraction for residents at the Ormond Hotel. He had gators, he had a museum. It was very easy to raid the ground, essentially, and find all kinds of artifacts. And so he did all this. You can still go to Three Chimneys and see it. It's by the Moose Lodge on Granada in Ormond Beach. He also ran tours on the Halifax River, which of course was just at the foot of the Ormond Hotel. Now this is the casements. This is the house that John D. Rockefeller bought. So if I'm standing looking at this house, the Ormond Hotel would have been right behind me. This house was built by a gentleman named Reverend Harwood Huntington. He and his wife built the house, raised their kids there. She apparently was the daughter of the man who started the Pullman Railroad Company. Keep the money all together. So the shot you saw right before that was from here. That's Granada Boulevard out there. This is like the parking lot looking at the front. So this was John D. Rockefeller's summer home, where he, winter home, where he spent the last years of his life. Trying to live to be 100. He died in 1937 at 97. And there were a couple factors that changed the popularity of Ormond Beach and the Ormond Hotel. One of them was that Rockefeller wasn't there anymore to be this lure for people. But it also just so happened that because of Flagler and his railroad, the regions of West Palm and even Jekyll Island in Georgia were building up. So Ormond Beach began its decline. But let's go back to 1902. There was a guest at the Ormond Hotel by the name of J.F. Hathaway. And he observed a bicycle race on the beach. Now, if you know, the sand here in Volusia County is strangely solid and packed. You literally can ride a bicycle or a motorcycle or drive a car on the sand. I have ridden a bicycle on the beach. So he saw a bicycle race on the beach when he was staying at the hotel. And he thought, hey, this is something that we definitely should develop. So he talked to the owners, Anderson and Price. Let's start races. So they hired a New York sports writer by the name of J.W. Morgan to promote bicycle races. And the first race on the beach affiliated with the Ormond Hotel was in 1903. And the beach in Volusia County as the birthplace of speed was begun. This is a picture actually of Daytona Beach, a little out of sequence, you can tell by the cars, but it gives you an idea of the expanse of the beach line. And we'll come back to this as we proceed, but look at that antiquitech. Look at that. Look at all this geometry. It was probably a waterway. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. Octagon. Look at this antiquitech. But you see the expanse and you see, I guess, look at that car. This is probably the 50s. People were driving their cars on the beach, and you still can. In 1904, Flagler decided to build Ormond Garage. It was right on the beach because people were coming and racing their cars on the beach. What was happening is all the race car drivers would gather around a certain portion of the beach where there was a dune, work on their cars together. And, you know, these guys didn't have money to stay in these big snazzy hotels, so they slept in their cars on the beach. It was comfortable. But yeah, so Flagler went ahead and built Ormond Garage. So there was actually a place where they could have space to work on their cars, but also where they could flop if they had to. One of the early race car drivers on the beach who slept in their car was this guy right here, Henry Ford. So there's Ormond Garage. It's gone, burned down like everything else in '76. Here you see the cars that they were, stock cars that they were using to drive, race on the beach. There are places called Ormond Garage now. There's the last version that I saw of Ormond Garage was kind of a cool gastropub. Look like the old garage, but it's not. The old garage was wood and burned. So there were some really interesting people coming to the Hotel Ormond to get in on this race stuff. People whose names you might know today. That's Ransom Olds, the man who designed a car that some of you might not be old enough to remember, the Oldsmobile. I remember Oldsmobiles. My family had Oldsmobiles. The first car I learned to drive was an Oldsmobile. Big boat, as cars were then. Ransom Olds created his first steam car in 1887. He was a race car driver, mechanic, tinkerer, and Oldsmobiles were very popular cars at a certain point. There's also this hack. Now just look at this guy. Just, oh my God, look at that guy. That's Glenn Curtis. So he was an aviator and bicycle racer and motorcycle racer. In 1908, he joined the Aerial Experiment Association, which was something founded by Alexander Graham Bell to build flying machines. He built flying machines. He built different kinds of aerial things. And the Curtiss-Wright Corporation became the company that built many planes for the Army and the Navy. Now, interestingly enough, I haven't done research on this, but interestingly enough, there is a world famous aeronautical school in Daytona called Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. I did not look into it, I don't know. But the fact that a guy who is famous for aeronautics was here in this incredibly influential time with all these inheritors makes me think there might be a connection there. This is Sir Malcolm Campbell. He was a British motorcycle racer and car racer and racing rider. He eventually won the Grand Prix. And then that's a name you know. Harvey Firestone was here too. Now, I don't have a picture of another guy who I'm sure you'll know, and that was Louis Chevrolet. He was also here in those days, getting in on the action. So you can see, they literally could drive on the sand. It was really, really packed solid, especially when the tide was really, really out. When they started, the racetrack was just a straight strip. And if you're curious, you can find out from what street to what street the track was. Eventually, the road, which is now A1A, the beach road, became paved. And the track became circular, including the A1A as part of the track. Can you imagine if you lived there and all these races were going by your front door? There is a restaurant called North Turn and another restaurant called South Turn, where you can go and ride your motorcycle and have wings and sit by the beach. And I have done that. And back in the day, that was where the north turn of the track was and the south turn of the track. So this was the place. Daytona, Ormond Beach was the place. And everything went great until the racetrack was built in 1959. This is Daytona and the NASCAR racetrack. So that ended all that beach stuff. This is interesting. So this is International Speedway. That would be 95. I don't know when this picture was taken, but my understanding is the racetrack was built in 59. I can assure you, this does not look like this now. This is all built up. But how beautiful it was then. And look at all the cars, man. So cool looking at old pictures, isn't it? Now, there were other hotels in Ormond Beach. Of course, nothing to compete with the Coquina and the Ormond, but there were other hotels. That was called the Inn at Ormond Beach, and you see the cars are just parked on the beach there. Another incarnation of that, the Breton Inn. Look at those poor women and men in suits. Lord, the times. Everything fell into ruin. So, as I said, both of the managers, Anderson and Price, died in 1911. I can't believe that's a coincidence. That must be some Masonic gematria. Then we had the Depression. And then there were two hurricanes that did a lot of damage in 26 and 28. What was left of the Ormond Hotel moved through the hands of several owners over a period of time. In 1955, what was left of it was bought in bankruptcy court and turned into a retirement home. That went bankrupt too. In 1911, the city ordered it evacuated, and in 1992, it was demolished. That's left, as I said, it was moved to the park, which would have been at the foot of the old hotel at Fortunato Park, which is right under the Granada Bridge, and the heritage condos that stand there now across from Fortunato Park. That's part of the original building. That's it. Little pretty antiquitech there. So all this stuff's going on. Daytona's booming for all kinds of reasons, many of which have to do all that racetrack stuff. Ormond is booming, still booming at the time. But there's all this stuff going on. What's this stuff going on in Florida? What is all this? Man, everybody's coming to Florida in the winter. Everybody's coming to Florida. So there's Daytona and Ormond, but there's a whole region in the middle, at least on the land side of the Halifax River. We now call that place Holly Hill. Back in the 18s, it was swamp. But because of people like Flagler, developers in the northern Midwestern and Northeast started getting bright ideas. So in 1825, an Ohio developer and furniture manufacturer by the name of William Collins Hardesty got the idea to build a winter community in sunny Florida on the banks of the Halifax River, which used to be called Mosquito River. A whole community, hotel, winter cottages, a zoo, casino, boat and canoe club, a gondola canal, a riding academy, a polo club, and a hunting club. Woo-wee! Rio Vista, the Riviera on the Halifax. Some of it got built. The Riviera Hotel did. It's still standing, though it's an assisted living facility. Some of what was built here still stands. He hired an engineer by the name of Frederick Swineford to design the grounds. Swineford was known for his expertise with designing curvilinear roads, irregular lots, lagoons, parks with plazas and monuments in them, and commercial spaces with shops that shared space with hotels and schools. This, by the way, is a contemporary picture of the Riviera Hotel, sitting as it is as assisted living facility. And it's a nice assisted living facility. This is all in the city of Holly Hill, which we call Holly Hill now, being named after the county from which the first landowner came from in Ireland. The first landowner came from Hollyland, Ireland. And so he named this area, Holly Hill, after where he came from. Now, back to Hardesty. The landscape architect was Albert Davis Taylor, who was a member of the American Association of Landscape Architects. So there's an American Association of Golf Course Architects, and there's an American Association of Landscape Architects. Well, I think you all know who's a very famous member of the American Association of Landscape Architects, Olmsted. This hack went to the Cleveland School of Design and was known for developing all kinds of Civil Work Association things in time. 2 parks in Cincinnati, a filtration plant in Cleveland, the boys' town, the main boys' town in Nebraska, Cumberland Park in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, New Hampshire Echo Park, Forest Hill Park in Cleveland Heights, several marine hospitals in Cleveland, Baltimore, and New Orleans, and the grounds at the Pentagon. The Riviera Hotel opened in 1825. The Riviera Golf Course opened in 1926. Now we're back to golf courses. The American Association of Golf Course Architects member W.D. Clark is attributed with building the golf course, designing the golf course, establishing the golf course at the Riviera Country Club at Rio Vista on the Halifax. And he is quoted as noting that there were mounds there when he started. Mounds. Well, we know what were under those mounds. Now, Holly Hill is an interesting place. Not only is the Halifax River part of its geographical lineup, but it's full of ponds and canals, some of which seem to be natural movements. Many, though, are not. Many are built, clearly. And as you would learn from listening to Michelle Gibson, they weren't built in this time frame, but we won't go down that road. Holly Hill is very vulnerable when the storms come through. This is a picture actually of when I still lived in the area in Daytona Beach. This is the Halifax River. This would be Riverside Drive. This is when the Halifax River literally came onto Riverside Drive, was going into people's houses. You know, Riverside Drive is right here and there were houses over here. There were sailboats. When the water went down and the storm passed, there were sailboats on the road. This was a pretty bad storm. I don't remember. Sandy, maybe? I don't remember what storm it was, but you know, you can drive through Holly Hill on the main roads like Nova Road or Ridgewood, and you can see the unevenness. You can see the culverts where all the canals have been filled in. What you think of those canals, I guess, is up to you. By 1927, Rio Vista on the Halifax had 3,600 lined up lots, a 1,200-acre hotel, which we saw remains as the Riviera Assisted Living Facility, 38 homes in the properties around the golf course, which still stand, and 15 miles of paved road. Now, the Great Depression ended all of this, as many things. But it seems to me like there was a little more going on in Holly Hill at the time. This is kind of across the street from all this Rio Vista stuff is. This is City Hall in Holly Hill. I've been in City Hall here. I've been to city council meetings. Does that look like something that was built before the railroad went through? Because that's when they say it was built, with Kokina. What do you think? Seems to me there was a lot going on here. A lot. You think maybe there was some finding going on here? These were found. Cymatic porthole. When Holly Hill was established, there was a school built. This was the school, and it's still there. Oh, who built the school? Who built that school? Was that designed as a school? I don't know. This is on Riverside Drive. This is one of the cool old houses in Holly Hill. The houses are very humble. Octagon house. Right on the river too. River's across the street. There's another cool house on Riverside Drive, right across the street from that flooding river. Look at that cool house. This is not Holly Hill, Florida. This is Holly Hill, Wisconsin. But I just included this for its antiquitech beauty. Came up in the search for Holly Hill. I don't know anything about this, but it's Holly Hill, Wisconsin. What's this? Well, part of what Hardesty wanted to have was gondola tours through all the canals that were there. The canals that he says he dug. Of course, I don't think that's true. I think the canals were there. This was the old entrance to the place. So the golf course would have been on one side, and across the road was the hotel. This is on Calle Grande Drive. The houses that remain to this day from his time are back behind all of these. Gondola rides. It is said that his wife was the designing force behind these. They still stand. And interesting enough, the railroad tracks go right past them, because we are supposed to believe that they were built there on purpose, and the canals dug there on purpose, right by the railroad track. So people going between Daytona and Ormond would go past them and go, oh, what's that? What's here? What do you think? They're in pretty bad shape. You know what else? We're supposed to believe that they were built to look old. They were built at the time to look old. They were built to look like ruins. We're supposed to believe that. This body of water is now the B29 drainage canal. It goes all the way through there. Lots of home developments. The county owns the columns now. Lots of photo shoots are taken here. Sits behind a Publix grocery store, which is a Florida chain grocery store. They were built to look old. That's what they say. Huh. Huh. So we had a depression. Florida had 2 bad hurricanes. Hardesty couldn't sell anything anymore. And he died in 1935 in one of the houses on the property that was in the middle of foreclosure. In 1998, what was left of the Riviera Hotel was made into a 77-unit assisted living facility. That's it. And it's very nice. It's very, very nice inside. See, so I'm going to take the tech there. Taking everything off the ceiling. Parts of what things would have looked like had they come to fruition. Now, here we are. The first place I lived when I moved to Florida, and actually I lived about 3 blocks from this very spot. You can still drive down and park your car on the beach. That's the Main Street Pier. The world's most famous beach. So I want to give you an image. On top of the race car driving that was going on. In fact, some of the pillars under the pier were removed at the time to make it safer for the race car drivers. You've got this going on. I want to give you another image. Prohibition was between 1919 and 1920. There were rum runners on these waters. The boats would come in at night all along Florida. This particular area was very famous for rum runners because those fancy schmancy stock cars that were made fast, made really good cars for running rum and outrunning the police. So the cars would line up along the beach for the rum boats to come in using lanterns and code, Morse code, to let people know. Well, there were also cops out there with boats. And a lot of times what happened is they would raid the boats, jump on the boats, throw all the rum overboard. Next morning, what was all over the beach? Bottles of rum. Interesting image. Now, you are to believe that all of this wonderful Coquina construction, and more of which you're going to see, and the pier, was all part of a 1936 WPA restoration project. That's what you're supposed to believe. I'll let you make your own decisions about that. This is an aerial view. I don't have a date of Daytona. This is the Halifax River. This is the Atlantic Ocean. This is Orange Avenue. The ballpark is here. So is the courthouse. This is called Mainland. This is called Beachside. So this road on this side is referred to as Orange Avenue. The bridge on this side and the road on this side is Silver Beach. This bridge has recently been rebuilt. It was closed the last couple years that I lived there. This is the International Street Bridge, which also looks different now. International Speedway Boulevard. I lived like right about there when I lived in Daytona. I think it was called the Broadway Bridge back then. This is the Seabreeze Bridge back in the day. And this was the Ormond Street, Ormond Bridge. So the Ormond Hotel would have been here. Oh, no, you know what? I'm looking at this wrong. I'm sorry. Let me correct that. This is the Seabreeze Bridge. This is the, what was it called? There are two bridges there that are now one bridge, but they used to be two, because one bridge went east and one bridge went west. And I can't remember now the two streets, but that's what these two bridges are. And this is the Ormond Bridge. This is the Ormond Bridge. So the Coquina Hotel, if I have it correct, would have been right about here. And the Ormond Hotel would have been here. And Rio Vista on the Halifax would have been in here. There's some big condos here now. There also used to be a seaplane dock. Anyway, this was all Daytona. This was Holly Hill, and then this was Ormond. This is the municipal marina, though now it's massive. Massive. So yeah, so I don't have a lot written down for all this Daytona Beach stuff. This is just a little Tartary in Daytona Beach. You tell me if you think that this stuff was all built as WPA projects. You decide. Just take a look. You decide. Daytona Islands. This is out International Speedway, about halfway to the racetrack where this is. This still stands, and there's a housing area back there. It's west of Nova Road. People in Daytona know exactly where that is. Now this is the band shell. So this is the world's most famous beach here. The pier is here off the view. This still stands. It's still used for all kinds of things like this, but we're supposed to believe that this was built as a works project, 1936 project. Look at that. During the days of Girls Gone Wild and Spring Break on MTV, there were spring break shows here all the time. Blink 182 was supposed to play here. Crowded House, The Fix. The golden ages of MTV. Does that look, WPA, you think? Now this is the old boardwalk. I don't know how old this picture is. A lot of this stuff, these attractions were still there when I moved to Daytona. This bridge wall is still there. This was supposed to be part of the WPA. This was a kind of weird suspension ride thing. There was a Ferris wheel, then there wasn't a Ferris wheel. There's a Ferris wheel again. See, the story is that in the 20s, as the city was really being affected by many things, this boardwalk area at the time was looking run down. So the city was able to get all that depression money to come in and rebuild it. And so that's when all this stuff was supposed to be rebuilt. But I'll let you decide what you think about that. So all of this was supposed to have been built. Let's see. Looks like 50s cars, I'd say, right? Late 50s, early 60s. There's the band shell. All of this was supposed to be built as WPA. Look at this. Look at this. Look at that. Yeah, look at this interesting sacred geometry here. And there's a octagon. Looks very different now. There's a huge Hilton Hotel and all kinds of ridiculous, ugly stuff there now. Kind of big, the band shell. Kind of big and spectacular. I was blocks from here, and actually, this was a place. I'd make a cup of coffee in a thermal mug, and I'd walk down to the beach on a regular basis when I first moved. This is the clock tower that's down there as part of all that sacred geometry that we're supposed to believe was just WPA decorative stuff. You decide what you think. They still stand. Back in the day, there's the clock tower. It's all different here. But there is a Ferris wheel again. And you see there were grand hotels back then too. True grand hotels. There's a lovely shot of the clock tower. You know, I remember when I lived in Daytona and I just happened to be walking down here because it's a pretty place to walk. Not David Copperfield, the other guy, not David Copperfield, the other illusionist. I can't remember his name. Chris, somebody? He was doing a free show down here at the clock tower. Look at that antiquity. Huh. Yeah, yep, yep, just a clock tower. Clock tower with a fountain in the middle of it. Yep, yep. There's the pier. That's a Joe's Crab Shack now. Yep. This is when the racetrack went on the paved road of A1A up to the south turn and the north turn. This is the old track. And this was a long time ago when nothing was here. That's the Ponce Inlet Lighthouse out there. But you can see it was a popular thing to do. But look. So this is, the north turn was up above Ormond Beach and the south turn was down, almost down to the inlet. This is Ponce Inlet, but right in the middle, there was a lot of stuff. Well, right in the middle is Daytona. What is all that? We don't know, but there was something there. Could it be some of this? Could this stuff have been there then? Like the Clarendon? This is now the plaza. Does that kind of look like what we saw before? Kind of in the middle there? You see there's something there on the other side of that. I guess that's the Clarendon. That would have been the Clarendon then, but there's the amphitheater and the clock tower. Making use of all these negative electrons. Oh, and you know what? If you cross the Halifax River, what do you find? You find this. Isn't it interesting how post offices are sometimes the most beautiful building in a town? This is an old postcard of the Clarendon. I showed you that before. This is now the plaza. Hotel. You can drive right down to the beach there. That's that would be Seabreeze Boulevard right there. Yeah, here's that post office on Beach Street. Isn't that interesting? Look at that Antiquitech there. It's not a very good picture, but I guess that one was being restored. But Mercury Ball, look at those huge area doors. Look at all that steel and iron. Post offices. It's fascinating how they're some of the grandest buildings in a town. Look at that. What do you think? Now, this is also on the mainland side. That's the Halifax River there. This doesn't stand anymore, unfortunately. The base is there, but this is gone. This was the American Legion fountain and honorarium. We are to the lead. The Halifax River. I don't know why they tore it down. I guess because Antiquitech is dangerous. There's a cool old photo of the band show. Look at that. When it was used for different things. And when the walls were more extensive than they are now. And also, right down the road from all of this was this church, the First Baptist Church. I'm not sure if this is still standing. I remember when I lived there, there were two magnificent churches here. This is all kind of in the same area on the mainland side, right over the International Speedway Bridge. One of these churches, this one or the other grand one, got torn down in that amount of time. I'm not sure if it was this one or the other one. There's the bell. Pretty Tartary place. I think this was the old Plaza Hotel, which was south of all of this a bit. But again, who built that? For sure. Oh, let's see what that says. Oh no, that's the Clarendon. Okay. Looks different there, doesn't it? I don't know where all these people were coming from that were staying there. There's the Clarendon from the beach, so you could just drive from the road right through here onto the beach. I guess you still can, but I think it's limited to hotel guests. I don't think people can drive under there. A pretty snazzy hotel. Pretty snazzy. It's called the Plaza now. And it doesn't look like this. Looks like a tacky hotel on the beach. This is the main street where the post office is. The post office is down here, but this is Beach Street. This is like downtown Daytona, where these wonderful, a lot of these old buildings are still there. But this is the Halifax River, and before the bridges, people took these cool little ferries to get across. Water boats. I wish there's still little water boats. I'd take them. Now, isn't that dynamic? See, remember I told you there was there is still an aeronautical school here. So there were all kind of strange aerial things going on in the history of Daytona. That's the Clarendon. What is that? I don't know what that is. It's like a windmill. Strange place. Dynamic place. There's that American Legion. Fountain back in the day. This is Beach Street now. Some of the beautiful old buildings that still stand. Look at all this Tartary in Daytona. Old shot of Beach Street. See, so that's the Halifax River. That would now be what is now the International Speedway Bridge, but now it's a high bridge. And the Main Street Bridge is on the other side of that. It's gone, but the fountain and the platform are still there. But you see, this was all full of meandering water and antiquitech. But most of this still looks like that. View of the Clarendon Hotel, what is now the plaza. Drive right down to the beach. Really snazzy. This isn't too far away. Look at this church. This still stands. I've always loved this church. It's on Oak Ridge or Seabreeze. I can't remember which. Look at that. You think that was built as a church? I don't. Here's the bell tower again. And fountain. Sure. WPA project. This is Main Street. Main Street continues to the pier on one side, the Daytona pier, and across the Halifax River on the other side. This building is still there. I think this building is too. I think this is the barber shop now. This is completely overrun during bike week. Oh, and that's the old fire station. Huh, does that look like a fire station to you? Look at that doorway. Did you know there was all this Tartary in Daytona? I'm so sad that they tore this down, but you see that this whole park area here, which is along Beach Street, had all this canal water. Michelle, what's with all the canal water? That's on Beach Street. Interesting that it's a museum, right? Look at that bar magnet. And this is the old hospital. It's much bigger now, but this portion of the hospital still stands, the Halifax Hospital on International Speedway and Nova Road. This part of the hospital is still there. I'm not sure where this was, the Seaside Inn. I think it might have been on Orange Street, but see again, it's not there anymore. Quite a big place back when. Oh, this is Main Street. Okay, I do know where this was. This is on the beach side. Yeah, there were two big hotels actually on Main Street back in the day. I remember that, talking to people who had lived there for a long time. This was the Highlight Arena or whatever you call it that doesn't stand anymore down by what is 95 and International. What does that look like to you? I mean, we know that there was an aeronautical center. Does that look like a dirigible barn to you? I think that's exactly what that was. This is the old Crest building on Beach. When I moved, this was still running. These were still up. And there were some attractions down at the end. Everything was all tore up and screwed up then. This used to be a casino and dance hall back in the day. But yeah, these were running when I moved there. This was just a couple blocks from where I lived. Another shot of the band shell. And that's usually what the water looks like. This is the old Olds Hall down in this old downtown part. You just see all this antiquitech. Who built all this? Not who we think. So that's when it was a casino and dance hall. People did fish off the pier. They still do. Cool shot of the north turn. That's up in the north of Ormond Beach area. They're coming around to get on A1A and go south. What was the train station was on Magnolia Street in that part of Daytona that I've been showing you between the river and the mainland. And a train station from the 20s to the 80s. Another view of the train station. It was torn down in the 80s, but look at that. There is a Sheraton. Doesn't look like this. I don't know how they got people for all these rooms back at a time when people only came here in the winter. This was, again, another shot of the first picture I showed you of Daytona. This was outside of a housing community. Again, was just all supposed to be part of a WPA project. That's just supposed to be decorative. And you can't talk about NASCAR and Daytona Beach without talking about the Streamline Hotel. This is still there, though it's been redone. This is A1A. And the rooftop bar is famous because that is where Bill France, the founder of NASCAR, and the initial drivers and promoters all met over a month of meetings to form what is now NASCAR. Because what was going on is there were agents who would sell tickets to the races when they were on the beach, and then they would leave before the race was over. So they would take all the proceeds and the drivers weren't getting paid. So Bill France Sr., the France family owns NASCAR and the racetrack and all that. Well, they own Daytona along with the Husseinis. They formed NASCAR on the rooftop bar. When I moved to Daytona, this beautiful place was a total dump. It was a youth hostel. Part of it was a youth hostel. Part of it was like a boarding house. And it was the subject of the show Hotel Impossible at one point, to 2014 when that was going on. I still lived in the area then. I remember that when that was going on, and it reopened in 2017, and now it's all like South Miami Beach deco, and I guess they're doing really well. But anyway. Apparently, when all the NASCAR stuff was going on, when they were driving on the beach, this was oftentimes downstairs was like an emergency hospital for all of that. What it looked like in the day. Beautiful. This is the old Seabreeze Bridge. Remember when I showed you the bridges? There was a bridge. One went east to west from the mainland to the peninsula, and one went west to east. So this is the Seabreeze Bridge, and then the Oak Ridge Bridge would go the other direction. So they were just one-way bridges. Now it's two gigantic bridges that span over the water. And there we are. Man, that was long. That was over 2 hours. Thank you for hanging out with me. And now you know more than you even knew you were interested in about Flagler in Volusia County and the Ormond Hotel and a little bit of NASCAR and a lot of the Tartary of Daytona and Volusia County. I again thank my Valkyries at Unguru, Michelle, Melanie, and Buffy for bringing me in to the ensemble. I thank all of you for your coffees and comments and interest in being a subscriber. I am off now to put together stuff for my next video, which is going to be about the Huguenot Cemetery in Old St. Augustine, the Yellow Fever Cemetery, it's also known as, here in St. Augustine. I never did finish my coffee. I'm going to finish it now. And I thank you for hanging out with me in this morning, afternoon, or evening. Thank you. I appreciate you. This is Medusa Was Framed. My name is Joyce, and ciao until the next one.